Welcome to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where we feature top leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry with your host, Drew Hendricks. Now, let's get started with the show.
Drew Thomas Hendricks here. I'm the host of the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where I talk with leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry. Last week, I had a great conversation with Amy LaBelle. She runs a winery out of New Hampshire, and she also has a TV show talking about what it's like to work in a winery and the food and all the beverages that are surround it. If you haven't checked that out, be sure to watch it, listen to it, and subscribe. Today's episode is sponsored by Barrels Ahead. Barrels Ahead, we work with you to implement a one-of-a-kind marketing strategy, one that highlights your authenticity, tells your story, and connects you with their ideal customers. In short, we help wineries and craft beverage producers unlock their story to unleash their revenue. Go to barrelsahead.com today to learn more. Today, we're talking about the art and science of storage and distribution. I have Mark Hiddleson on the show. Mark is the founder of Specialized Storage Solutions, a company founded back in 2004. And they specialize in the facility design, racking, shelving, and conveyor systems. And in addition to serving national powerhouses such as Costco and Home Depot, they work with wineries and logistic companies to develop elegant solutions that are both a blend of brick and mortar and virtual business models. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you for having me, Drew. I'm excited.
Yeah, Mark, thank you so much for being on. This is a topic that I really wanted to learn more about, especially like when we kind of talked a few weeks ago. You were telling me about the whole art behind designing these things. So I got to say, how did you get into the storage business?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I got right out of college. I was looking for something I wanted to do. I'd already had a little bit of background in sales, and I had changed my major 3 times. And so I'm like, all I have to do is find the perfect combination between these 3 majors. So I started out in psychology. I changed to engineering until it got too hard. We had a professor that gave a speech one time. We'd all, in high school, I didn't have to study at all. I would just get straight A's on everything. But engineering got really hard. And there was a statics class. We studied for hours, and everyone bombed it. And then we were all working together, study groups, and the professor was really mad. He gave this speech. It was one of those life-altering speeches that he said, if you guys want the easy classes, they're on the other side of the campus. And I was sitting there. I'd been in school for 3 or 4 years, and I didn't know they were on the other side of campus. Yeah, it was found out now. Because I didn't really think anything was easier. Nothing sounded easy, but I walked over that day and I go, what is he talking about? So I know you have one of the things I liked about your bio is you have a degree in Greek. It's some kind of Greek philosophy. Was it Greek? Attic Greek
and philosophy. So yeah, 8 semesters of ancient Greek. I thought I was gonna be a professor. I thought I was just gonna learn all the languages and read all the books in their original language. I got through 8 semesters of Greek, and the degree in philosophy never pursued the graduate degree in that.
And I was passionate about that too. So I had taken a few classes just for general ed. I said, I'm going back over there. I'm going to see what he's talking about. So I went to philosophy. So the way I decided is I looked at all the classes I'd taken. I said, okay, what am I closest to at this point to graduate? And it turned out economics was the answer. And because I'd taken all the engineering math ahead of time, when I got to econ, people were like, oh, it's so hard. It's so hard. And it's just kind of hard to get some of the concepts. They're not intuitively, you don't grasp. But with the math background I had, and then I had worked full time. So I kind of was at a dilemma because all the starting salaries coming out of college, I had 5 years experience as assistant sales manager. I had construction background, some engineering because I was working in engineering. So the Sac State back then, they used to keep the career center had little 3-ring binders, and I would just go through them. But I was looking for something that was close to what I was making, because my next step at my job, which was in the car business, was going to be, quite a bit of money. So I'm like, I have to take a 50% pay cut. Yeah. And it just so happened there was an ad for this business. And then I've gotten a lot of hard time whenever I tell this story, but it was the most. I'm like, I'm starting with the highest amount of money. But it was still a pretty good pay cut, but it kind of fit all those things. It was, it was sales because it was building a new territory in this business. It was engineering because a lot of this stuff requires engineering. You have to work with engineers. Oh, sure. And that's one of the things I found is I could communicate well with construction, engineer, and kind of be the in-between. So I went for it. I looked into the industry and I noticed that most people wanted used equipment. And so the company that actually had that ad in the 3-ring binder, I ended up going to work for them because they didn't do anything new. Everything was brand new. Oh. And so I looked in the yellow pages. It was not back in 1997. I let my fingers do the walk and said, who sells used equipment in this business? And I just called on the phone. I talked to one of the sales guys to kind of find out. I have a thing. If you really want to find out about a company or you want to find out what's going on, talk to the salespeople first. They'll give you the lowdown. And the guy I talked to, I mean, he's still, I consider one of the best mentors I ever had. He finally retired after like 40 something years in this business, but he told me how it was. He said, it's not going to be easy, but with your skill set, you could probably create something here. And so the rest was kind of history. I introduced myself to the owner and I worked with him for 8 years before I started my own company.
Wow. And that was in the used equipment business.
Yeah. Used equipment. I mean, we did a combination of new and used, which you kind of have to, but yeah, we had equipment. What's that?
What type of equipment?
So it's racking and shelving. Most people go to the kind you buy in Costco. And it's not the kind you buy in Costco. It's the kind that Costco stores their stuff on.
Yeah, it's not the $250 rack that I have in my garage.
I mean, we have those, and I do actually. It's not one of our specialties. It's funny, but anytime somebody asks me and they have a really cool project that they want to do, I'll make an exception and do small projects. But anything big to small. A lot of our clients have started out putting a few shelves. We had this guy at Soccer City. He was selling soccer uniforms in Elk Grove, California. It's a little suburb of Sacramento. And at that time, the soccer thing was just taking off. There were all these new soccer leagues, and he had a retail store, but he was doing the uniforms. He was doing the uniforms out of his garage. So it would be, Mark, I need more shelves. I need more shelves. And pretty soon it was a garage, 5 storage units. And then he finally bought like a shopping center and turned half of that into a warehouse. So it is kind of everything from shelves like you have in your garage to 30-foot tall racks in a freezer that are loaded with a forklift and then multiple sections deep.
Now, as you're going from a garage to multiple storage locations to a warehouse, the logistics, well, not even just the logistics, but the setup and organization of that, the person isn't thinking when they're setting up all these little warehouses or these little storage facilities that they're going to be in a big warehouse. So there's got to be a whole kind of thought shift when you're moving into that. What is that true, or is that's the art and science behind the storage thing, isn't it? Is helping people scale?
It really is, in doing it in a way where you can still maintain your own business, because rarely does anyone have the luxury to say, okay, we're going to set up something new for distribution but you still have those orders coming in every day. Every Friday at 3:30, you have a business to run. So ours is kind of a blend, and that's why it's an art. I mean, it's really more of an art than a science, because you have to plan for the future while still taking care of your business right now. And we do a lot of work with customers that's just ongoing. And so we look down the road as far as we can. But a lot of times it's looking at their existing space. I mean, I'd say probably 90% of what we do, we look at someone's existing space and go, okay, this is what you've done so far. That you just did it to make it work to set up. What can we do to kind of plan for accommodating more, with growth on top of it?
Yeah. What do you see as the biggest mistake people make when you come into an existing space where they've kind of just made the best decisions that they thought in the trenches?
So it's a couple. It's really the aisles. Well, actually, the biggest mistake is they're storing stuff they shouldn't be storing. Go in there and go, what's that? Because I'm asking people. I love to ask a ton of questions. And one of my favorite clients, I call my best client. That's a smaller client, but Visa Tui Winery in Napa Valley is kind of one of the bigger ones. And Tom Davies, the president, and one of my clients referred me to come in there. And like, they're the first direct-to-consumer winery. I was impressed. I'm like, I'm getting into Visa too. So I was licking my chops. I'm like, I want to see what these guys are doing. And I was really, because I had known about it. I didn't know any of the owners. And it was when I got there, and it's like, man, they're doing everything pretty manual, but they have one guy who really knows everything about what's going on. So the nice thing when you set up shelves and everything has locations and everything has its place, I mean, not anybody can come in there, but it's a little bit of interchangeable who can go pull an order. And then I was going, well, what's this? What's that? And they're like, well, those are Christmas decorations. Like, well, we're going to get those up high, you know, because you got to get to them once a year. You got to have it, you know, and it's a beautiful winery. So, you know, their Christmas decorations like 50, 60 tubs. So I think it's stuff. And that's a common thing. I want to go, you just ask people, okay, we need to make a space for this. We need to make a space for that. And they're like, well, no, actually, that can go.
That does not need to be in this space.
Yeah. And then I'd say the other thing is there's different storage mediums, and a lot of people don't even realize what's possible. It's one of the reasons I didn't really create my website to get traffic or get clients. I developed it as a resource, because a lot of times I'm talking to somebody and they're like, well, I haven't heard of case flow racking, or I haven't heard of pushback racking or drive-in racking. Well, so you have a second. You know,
I haven't either. You got to tell me what that is.
You just have to go.
You got to go to your site.
Yeah, our site is. And then I did Instagram for the same thing. It wasn't, and it's actually we're attracting clients through that. But I've used it as a resource that you can just go to our Instagram account, and we have these little galleries. I wanted to set it. I just kept asking people, how can I do little galleries where people flip through and go, oh, that's what it is. So it's kind of hard to visualize. But especially in the wine industry, case flow racking is important, or any kind of direct to consumer.
What would that be? I mean, just to describe it to our listeners, like a case flow racking versus racking, I imagine.
It works based on gravity. So it's a rack, instead of having just a static shelf with like a, you know, wire deck is what's most common in the industry, but people use wood shelves. They're actually rollers, and you can either feed them from the front and kind of push it back on the rollers, or feed it from the back and get like a first in, first out. But the biggest advantage is you can make the shelves closer together, because if you have to reach back to get something, you have to have about a 3-foot opening. But if you have everything just rolling to the front, it's about, you know, however tall your product is. And
that's brilliant.
You get tons of more density, and everything's easier. The product's coming to you versus you have to reach way back on the shelf.
You painted a very clear visualization. I immediately understood, with space being such a premium, if you can gain 6 more inches on every single shelf, you've helped save a ton of money on future storage needs.
And it's not with those, it's not just the space, it's the travel time it takes you to get, if you had to walk that same, it's the foot traffic of how long. I mean, you've got less product in there. It's going to take you longer to pull an order, because instead of having 28 locations in an 8-foot bay, they might be spread out over, you know, 50 to 100 feet. So
that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. In the pre-show, we were talking about like, but very few people really understand the full logistics of wine storage and distribution. Can you give us a little semi masterclass on that?
It's a semi. I would love to. Do we have the rest of this? Can we talk about just that the rest of the time?
The super semi now.
It's a great question, and a lot of my clients are in this business, and in beverage, it's just gone through the roof. It's everything. It's not just wine. It's every kind of sports drink, energy drink. And there's a lot of new companies starting out. And I think the ones that are really able to scale quickly have a partner, like some 3PL, which is third-party logistics. I like to be careful. I don't use too many acronyms that other people are. But you can hire a third party. I mean, that's the smartest way to scale. And there's companies that specialize in all different size, like no matter what size your business is, usually there's somebody who will distribute your product for you. So
now, an example of a winery third-party logistics, what would be a company that we might identify with?
So the ones we do business, and so if I mention one, I have to mention
but
it is. So let's start with the big ones that give me a lot of referrals. So Valley Wine Warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
So, they store people's wine,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'll actually ship it to the tasting room, or they'll ship it direct to their clients. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of bigger wineries, they're not holding all their inventory. They've got it. And then when they need it, they'll order it, based on forecasting demand, how much traffic in the tasting room. So Valley Wine Warehouse is one of the big ones. Western Wine, I have to mention them. I mean, they're 8 or 9 facilities, like 1.6 square feet total. And they just have all these different, and they're not just wine, it's alcohol companies and everything. So another one, Sierra Pacific, they're in Modesto. So they're not even in Napa, but there's, the wine country now, it's all the way.
Oh yeah.
It's the whole state. And M7. So a lot of these you haven't heard of, but they're the ones that have all the wine.
That's where it's better for the wineries to store it in the central warehouses that help with the fulfillment and distribution of it. And that allows them to save the space for other stuff.
Yeah, the winery space is a huge value of just the real estate that you want to be having parties there, or tastings, or making wine. And so, but the other thing is these companies that have a very, very good, that's what they do. They do shipping. They don't make wine or anything else, but they have better relationships with suppliers for the boxes, the conveyors. They have better systems. Their staff is trained for, warehousing, labeling, storage, retrieval. And so if you're in the wine business, you don't want to have to become an expert. That's why you want the abbreviated. So the abbreviated version is find an expert. And another one I love is Big Red Wine Shipping, because they have a lot of the smaller boutique wineries. And we just did a really nice project for them. They can get multiple clients through one facility.
Mm-hmm.
That they can pull their orders. Yeah.
The advantages are tremendous because they take all the as you talk about the brick and mortar, but they also have that virtual, logistics system and the computers that are a little bit more than what a winery might have.
Yeah, they have relationships with UPS and FedEx and all of this, so they'll get you all the best shipping rates, all the best packaging rates, and combine it in a done for you service that is it's really pretty cool.
So you're in charge of helping them. Storage Solutions is going to help these 3PLs set up the proper warehouse for the proper so it's running at a maximum efficiency. Over the years, you started in 2004. How have you seen your solutions evolve over the last 17 years or so?
So the biggest thing that's kept us really busy is it's called the proliferation of Skus.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be there was Coke and Diet Coke, and everything else, and you could stack cans to the ceiling. It's really easy to stack cans. Mm-hmm. And then that really first started. I noticed I did a lot of projects with Pepsi, and they bought Sobe. And so they went from, and even Pepsi is more than Pepsi and Diet Pepsi. Now there's Diet Orange, caffeine-free, Slice, and every other, root beers and all these different SKUs. But when they bought Sobe, it just exploded. And they're going, we can't just stack the stuff on the floor anymore. Mm-hmm. We need to divide up the shelves so that we can get more in this cube. And then the technology's changed quite a bit. When I was in the Warehousing Education and Research Council for 10 years. I was on the leadership committee here in Northern California. And in the early 2000s, it was Walmart was really driving a lot of the supply chain innovation, because they were looking for, they wanted to deliver a low-cost solution to their stores. So they were kind of pushing all the costs. And there was a lot of pushback because people, hey, they're just pushing this back into the supply chain. But it was either get better or we're going to deal with the vendors who will.
Yes.
So at one time they had a thing where they made it mandatory where everyone had to have RFID chips, which is kind of it's a little different than barcodes. Like now you can scan a barcode, but the RFID were smart tags where you could track something anywhere in the warehouse. That RFID tag would tell you information about that product, when it was made, how it was shipped. I mean, there was just tons of stuff. And Walmart had this thing, everybody has to be on RFID. So that changed everything. And then there was this other big company.
It's amazing how they can change the whole industry just by saying, this is what we require. I don't know how you're going to do it. Go do it. So they're like forcing in innovation and inventions just because they can.
And they did. They did, and that's what people were talking about. I always went to the national convention with it's called WERC. It's WERC.org. I always love to mention them because I really built my career there. It's an educational it's just great for the art and science of warehousing. Just the people you meet, the kind of problems people are solving. And then in those breakout sessions, it was always afterwards. That's what people were talking about in the hallways. Was how are we going to, Walmart's this and Walmart's that. And then there was this other online book retailer that started growing and doing other stuff besides books. It starts with an A and rhymes with Gramazon. But they've been super innovative in that space. And I think one of the things that drove that is books have a really low margin. And so if you're shipping books, you can't make mistakes. You can't have returns, and you have to get a lot of stuff out the door. Mm-hmm. So their logistics were already pretty dialed in. The best systems I ever said, we toured at Barnes and Noble in Reno. Mm-hmm. Their stuff was really awesome. The conveyors, they're called a tilt tray sorter, where the books come by and it's just like a smooth piece of wood and it tips at exactly the right time and the book shoots off.
I've seen that in the commercials. I got a great mental image of what you're talking about.
Yeah, those tilted trays.
Jettison that book right then.
Yeah. You just go, how does it know when to do that? So, and the big thing, Amazon is just, they've hired a lot of supply chain talent, and to me, I was in this business. That's another reason I chose this business. I'll tell one on myself again, is that I go, it's going to be kind of easy to get to the top. And because my boss said the warehouse is the last frontier. And it was true. People would invest money in production. They'll buy a new bottling line. They'll buy conveyor systems for the production. They'll do all these other projects and tanks and everything. But it comes to warehouse, like, oh no, we have to have a warehouse. It's just back there.
Yeah, the warehouse guys will handle it.
And so I'd say that's the biggest thing, is that supply chain was always an afterthought, and now it's the thing that everybody is talking about.
Or it was like a very manual thought. Like you may have had the inventory control, but it wasn't really. Computers weren't dictating where the stuff was. It was just the warehouse manager that knew he knew where everything was, or she knew where everything was, but rarely would everyone else know where everything is.
Exactly. And that's, you want to set up your systems where if that superhuman guy needs to take a vacation or gets a cold, you want to have it set up where anyone can step in and find stuff.
That's a perennial challenge. And that's growing. Well, back in the day when I worked in the wine store and we had our big warehouse, sadly, we had a very manual, everything was on an Excel sheet or something. And we knew where it was, but if I wasn't there, chances are bottles would get lost. We weren't dealing with cases where individual bottles, but you still needed that location ability.
Yeah, and it's easy to make mistakes in wine when you're doing, because they look so similar. Like the reserve bottle looks really similar to the regular, and you don't want to make that mistake either way. Either way, it's cost you a lot.
I've seen that happen a couple of times. I've chased a couple people down the street knowing they bought the wrong bottle.
Nice.
So I like that. So Amazon took a separate route from Walmart, whereas Walmart said, look, this is what we want. You guys got to do it if you want to work with us. Amazon just said, no, we're going to build it and we're going to develop this technology.
Yeah. And they have really talented people, and they've the best thing I've heard, and they're also, I've always done warehouse tours for educational, to get a group of people, 30 or 40, host a tour. And I've never set up an Amazon tour. We had one set up, but they're a little secretive. Mm-hmm. But I've read articles. One of the genius things they did is that they set up their warehouse where they could put any product anywhere. It wasn't like all the TVs have to go right here and all the baseball mitts have to go right here. And then it's wherever the best spot, and they're letting the computer decide where this goes. And so they might have everything everywhere, but they can pull everything faster because they have everything everywhere.
That's unbelievable. I mean, that's the way a computer works. I mean, a hard disk, they just store chunks of information all over that hard disk.
So I think, to me, one of the most simple things that I've heard in the last 3 or 4 years that people are doing, that they're changing the way they're thinking, I thought that was genius. Yeah, because I'm sure there was a meeting where like, no, we have to keep the TVs with the TVs, or And
yeah, what if the computer breaks? So
yeah,
that would be a true surprise to me. I guess I mentally kind of got my mind around the fact that it wouldn't need to be stored logically, but mentally I'm also visioning this warehouse where, like you said, all the TVs are in one section, all the Cabernets are here.
yeah, yeah. So it's they're driving innovation now, and I think there's a lot of companies that are doing direct to consumer and fulfillment really well.
Mm-hmm.
And especially the last couple of years have forced people to get better at it. And it's the only way you can get stuff. And stores are setting up where people can order online and pick up in the store. I think that's a really great hybrid solution of, having a direct consumer experience where you don't have to stock everything on your shelves. I mean, when you were in that business, when you had the wine, you really didn't sell it unless you had it, right? When you had your wine business.
We either had it or we had futures or we had promises for it. So we're still selling something that we know eventually have if we don't have it now. But
and you were shipping directly to people's house, not to like a store or a.
No, we were all direct to consumer.
Yeah, yeah.
And we may have sent one or two containers overseas, but we're not going to talk about that.
Okay.
That was way back in the 90s. But going back to Visa Tui, just because we were talking about that, and you got the second guy in the back, and he knows where everything is, and they're storing the Christmas ornaments down on the bottom. They're not going to need it for another 360 days.
Right.
Get that out of there. What aside from the fact that a new winery or a new or even an old winery needs to talk to a consultant that, like yourself, that has sage and insight and arts and sciences, what's the one piece of advice that you can get someone setting up a brand new warehouse from scratch? Don't just stick a bunch of racks up there.
It's a great question, Drew. What the first best thing would be to call me. Yeah, obvious. That's why it's a great question. I would say it's a tour other facilities. I mean, I already said those facility tours, because even we've toured, like Radio Shack used to be a big one. That they were kind of one of the more a Target warehouse. Go to a bigger warehouse, see how the big boys are doing it, even if you're thinking about setting up a small operation, because chances are, if you can get a tour, if you can find somebody who will give you a tour, you learn a lot just by talking to the managers there, because they'll have so many different systems. Something's probably going to apply to what you're doing. And then really involving your team. That's another thing. I found that a lot of times there's hollow cows, or the communication, like the problems that are happening on the floor aren't making it up the chain, and it's just a budget or it's just a number. So I would say, finding, and it's the champions for us. It's funny. That's usually I find a client. I go, who's willing to kind of go to school? Because I'll take a new client and I'll say, look, I'm going to teach you everything about, and some of my clients give me a hard, when we were newer, I didn't have the time to do it. So I was like, look, you're going to have to do this. I'm going to show you how to do a sketch. Go in, here's how you do me, and I'll give you some props, but you're going to have to go talk to your boss about this, talk to your boss about this. So you find that person on your team. Sometimes it's in sales. Some of the things I love about this, sometimes it's the general manager takes over. Sometimes it's the warehouse manager, but kind of find that person on your team who has a passion for doing this homework. And then, find somebody like me. A lot of supply. That's how I train myself. I'd find a good supplier. One of my old mentors used to say, look, there's people who are gifted in this business, and there's people who just do it for a living. Go find the ones that are gifted and learn from them. It's like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And so I think that's it, is that you kind of find a champion and go, okay, who's going to go and want to do the legwork on this super exciting? Like, I get really excited about racking. But there's someone on your team that probably is, passionate about the layout, where, how they want, what kind of lift equipment. That's another big thing with us. The racking always has to be interchangeable with whatever lift equipment you have, or you have to buy new lift equipment. And that's a mistake that happens all the time. People will set up their racks, go to put the last pallet away, and they realize their forklift doesn't go all the way to that top shelf.
Yep. I would have made those exact mistakes. If mentally I was thinking, if I'm going to start a winery, I'm going to get a warehouse. I'm going to need some racks to put the wine on. I'm going to get the wine. Now I need some equipment and then I'm going to need a computer to figure out, to tell me where all the stuff is. And I probably just did it completely backwards.
And then another greater answer than even what I said would be get a bid from a 3PL. I mean, there's almost somebody who could 3PL anything.
Okay.
And so if you got a bid, and now I'm just kind of spitballing. Like that's what I would do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how much is it going to cost me per case? Because they'll usually give you, okay, it's, I don't know what it is. If I start spotting off the rates, my customers, my phone will start ringing.
But you've got to do the math. And what's the cost for storage for this case versus what's the cost of a 3PL handling it, plus all the other added benefits that they have.
And then they're managing it for me. So then you can focus on making wine, selling wine, and then they do all the rest. So I think, or really any storage business, anybody, whatever you're selling, and that's another trend. People have gone from a 3PL, and like, oh, we're paying these guys too much. Then they'll bring it back in house, and then they do that for a few years and run the numbers. Like, nope, we were doing better when we had a 3PL. Mm-hmm. So that third party logistics or public warehouse or those service providers are a really great resource for anybody shipping anything, I think.
Sure. And it probably doesn't have to be an all or none, because they're going to still have some of their local inventory. So you still need that hybrid approach, which is all the more reason to talk to a pro like you who can help them do that kind of analysis.
Yeah, it is. And the 3PL, they're happy to give you a quote. A lot of them, if you go on their website, there's just a thing you can fill out. They ask you the highlight questions so that they can really streamline the RFP and give you an idea.
No, that's great advice.
Yeah. I have a friend of mine that he came to one of our events. We were doing a presentation on wine distribution because it was kind of a fancy system that had a lot of bells and whistles, but he owned a solar company and he had these solar panels that they get, and they're either extras or they're parts, or the thing. He had all this inventory. He said, I have to keep this stuff. It's worth a lot of money. But they ended up storing the solar panels with one of my third-party logistics customers was there. They met, and he said, yeah, I can do those panels. So he was thinking about going and renting a warehouse. That's a separate, but every time you do that, there's another PG&E bill. There's another, you have to have somebody running. You have to have a forklift. You have to have, so the 3PL is a nice way to.
That's a great thing. People need to think more about that, and especially figuring out the cost difference, because it's automatically assuming reduce fees. Why are we paying them? But understanding really what would it cost you to do it yourself.
Yeah. And that's their core competency. Mm-hmm. That was the word I couldn't think of it earlier. It's their core competency is warehousing. So yeah. On
a shifting, we can stay real high level on this, but we're talking about tracking and chain of custody and all that. Where do you see the blockchain fitting in going forward?
So I've studied a little bit about this, and so the main thing they're saying transparency in the supply chain and security, because right now there's no transparency because there's no security. Mm. And so, I mean, blockchain, I guess it's what I think of it is in different terms. So were you asking me a question, how it's going to affect the logistics industry or just business overall?
Well, more logistics and warehousing, and because right now you do have, where everything is, and but it's really set between three different systems. So you still have that sort of integrity, but you don't have this immutable record of where something's been.
And then in wine, that's important, right? Or the temperature that it's been stored at.
Temperature, that whole, like I said, yeah, an immutable record. I see there's so many different people trying to develop some sort of a solution, but I'm not sure they're all taking it from a warehousing from a racking space like you're doing it, because they're thinking of more of that chain of custody. But in the end of the day, it's going to come right down to what you're doing in your solutions.
Yeah. And I think, the blockchain, what I've read about is right now, I'm because my thing is well, it seems to me like everybody, it already is a transparent supply chain. And so when I've researched, what I've done is that people aren't sharing their whatever it is because they don't want either the data to get breached or they don't want anybody to have access to it. And I think the other thing that I know is there's probably huge amount of low-hanging fruit in the area of figuring out your whole company's I call it digital consciousness. Like, how savvy is your whole company about data and how it's being stored, what's being stored, what that means to you, what you can do with it in, say, like sales. Like, a lot of people, they have a data team, and those guys, they're geniuses. They know everything, where the data is, how it's stored, what goes together. But do your salespeople know that? Do your customers? And then what's your customers' digital conscious level? Are they above or below you? And so I think there's some advantages. There's really some low hanging fruit, low level things people can do to just say, hey, is everyone on our team, because we did a small data project because I just wanted to see, like, how can we use it even with our company? And there was just a lot of language I didn't understand. It's like, wait a minute, I do all this other, I can't think of any of the words right now that we're talking about. And I go, I don't know what that is. Explain that to me. What? So I think ownership, your IT department, sales, customer service, and then your clients, just kind of getting everybody on the same, not on the same, but just if you're at a 5, get up to a 4, everyone doesn't have to be a 1, but you should try to get your 5s up to 4s, your 3s up to 2s. Everybody can kind of get a little bit more savvy about where the data is, how it's connected, how they're using it, and then why does it even matter? Like, so
that is, I think, the key. Why does it even matter? Like, there's a lot of, the future is bright on this whole area, but a lot of stuff is it really solving a problem that you're having right now? And what solution is it replacing? And is there, like you said, is there a lot of other solutions that you need to put in place first that has nothing to do with technology's future 5-10 years from now?
Yeah. I think the main thing would be getting your, and MHI did in 2019, which is ancient history. I was telling you something about that. There was a white paper that I read about this, and there's actually a digital consciousness survey that you can take. Like, if everybody, but what's really going to happen, you have to find a company who's going to, I even thought about us doing this, but you have to have, you can't, if you just send a survey to everyone, no one's going to take it. But if you hire a professional company to go in and say, no, this is what we're doing this survey, I think people would find out that there's a lot of opportunities, just because the potential problems will come up and people go, yeah, we can solve that problem. But if they don't have the knowledge of what's available, the people who know that there's a problem won't be able to raise their hand and go, oh, maybe that can solve, blockchain can solve that. And then what I really like blockchain for is creating like business communities, because there's a way to track activity where you can create like a loyalty program, and that you can track things that you never would have tracked before. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to hire a data company, because I like, man, all these referrals I've gotten over the years, because that's how I built my business. Where are they coming? Like, I kind of knew certain people, or, how do I find out, who these people are? What's the best way to stay in contact with them? But if you had the point system, like blockchain can track it, and you can have a thing set up. Like, if you give me a referral, you get 80,000 points or whatever.
That's a great, that's a use case. I don't really, I can definitely see the value on that.
Yeah, because you would have never kept track of it. But now, to me, I think if you can reward, and then people are wanting to earn rewards and get points, and I'll just have to be careful. I just read this book on numbers, and Pepsi Cola did a points thing one time. And they showed this kid, it was like a Super Bowl commercial. They showed him flying to school in a jet. And if you had like 7 million points or something, you could get the jet. And somebody did the math that they figured out they could buy enough extra points that for like 700 grand, they could get the thing, but it was a $20 million jet. And he actually legally did everything, got the points, and they went to court, and he lost because they said, well, it's a spoof, obviously a kid's not going to take a jet to school. But this book was saying, why didn't they just figure out the math? And they raised the number, but nobody ever thought about that before they did
I hadn't heard that story. I heard another story about a guy with airline miles, and that they were running a promotion, and if you got a certain number of airline miles, so basically this guy flies first class every day for free for life. The airline really messed up on that one, and his family, I think. I forget where I read this story, but I remember how he gained the points, and no one thought it would happen.
Yeah. So
he actually bought him. I think it was something where he spent like $100,000 or something, and now he's flying for life.
That's how this was. It was the same sort of thing where, you could never buy that much Pepsi, but there was a clause where, because they wanted people, if they were close, that they could just buy the extra, get, a leather jacket or a hat or a backpack, or jet.
That's funny. That's good. I want to shift because I hear that you have started a podcast.
I have. Thank you. That is, that's one of the most exciting. So that's what's changed in the industry. So this is the project that I've been working on it probably for at least a year. And it's funny because 5 years ago, I wasn't listening to the podcast. I actually went to we go to the film festival every year in Napa, and there was a documentary on podcasts. So we just kind of had some time, and my friends, we were just kind of teasing about it. Like, yeah, let's go watch the podcast. And yeah. So it's 2017, and the first thing they asked before they showed the documentary, they said, how many people here know what a podcast is? And those all people, it's mostly like 35 to 55. And there was out of 100 people, or maybe 10 hands, 20 at the most. And I was thinking, well, this isn't really something I'm into, but I was working with a coach. And one of the things he would do, he would send me an episode of something. And I didn't even roll. I mean, they were YouTube videos. And so he would say, you're specifically interested in this. And my best friend sent me, and then I was thinking, well, it's a podcast, I'm not going to listen to it. But I basically do, if my coach asked me to do it, I'm working with a life coach, I'm working with a business coach. If they ask me to do it, that's one of the reasons I'm hiring them is I'm going to do it. My best friend sent me a link to a podcast, and I listened to it. And I'm like, man, this is awesome. This is a conversation, because you can really get specific if you want to learn something specific. Like I wanted to learn about direct-to-consumer marketing so I could know more from my clients. So we'll watch podcasts on that. I wanted to find out about somebody had a podcast on networking. And I'm like, well, I love networking. So what are people talking about networking? And so I started listening to them. And it's like, rather than reading a book, I used to listen to like business tapes.
Oh, yeah.
And so podcast, it's just a little bit more tailored. I don't have to go around with the Carlton Sheets real estate. I used to have cassettes. Have you heard of Carlton Sheets?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I have the house where I'm sitting now. We bought this house because I listened to the Carlton Sheets tapes and ended up, getting real estate. But, podcast is just great. And even I love YouTube for some of the stuff. I'm really passionate about Alan Watts. He was a speaker in the 70s, mid-70s. You've heard of Alan. Well, you're a philosopher. So
yes.
Yeah. So exactly. So I'm like, wow, I can listen to a lecture that Alan Watts did in 1974 at Cal. And his stuff is just relevant as it was. I mean, he had a thing. He said, why should we be going to big offices in San Francisco? This was I think he died in 74. So I think it was 73 or something like that. He said, why should we be going to offices in San Francisco? He goes, everyone has a telephone. Everyone has a fax machine. There's no reason we should be telecommuting. I was like, wow, Alan Watts. Nice.
Forethought.
So, yeah. And then me doing a podcast. I mean, I wouldn't even have thought this was possible, but I met John Corcoran. I actually met John on that. He was one of the second podcasts. He was the networking podcast. And I was like, this is cool.
I work with those same guys. I work with John and Jeremy Weiss. They help produce this podcast.
And they are awesome. Yeah. So I went to one of their events. I wanted to connect with John because he was local, and ended up running into Jeremy first because I was in Chicago. But I just been to their events, and I saw I keep track of what they're doing. I get their newsletter, which is the paper. They do an actual paper.
Pretty nice. They actually do a paper newsletter once a month.
And I used to read Inc. magazine, or I'll give them another shot. I mean, I'd read through that because there's no ads, right? It's like 10 things. It's like, these are the things I want to read. So it's like a streamline. So I loved that. And then I saw that they were producing podcasts. And so I waited to start the conversation because I love working with those guys, because I knew as soon as I started talking about it, it was going to happen.
Yeah, so it sneaks up on you as soon as you commit, you're on your first turn. What?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, and I think I'm passionate about watching it. And I think a lot of the other thing, it was a big give back for me because I have all these people. So, there's 40, 50 people who've given me all these referrals over the years. They've taught me things about their industry veterans. They've mentored me for no gain of their own. So I was thinking, well, this is a great way for me to connect, because I'd missed a few clients where they had gone to other places and they're like, oh, I forgot, or I didn't, know, or I even had to host some tours and I called these people to set up tours and they needed racking. So I was like, well, that's a great way to kind of get people involved, deliver value, create a sense of community, and give back to a lot of the mentors and people I've worked with over the years who really helped me. So I'm doing it.
It's a great motivation. Now, what's this podcast called?
So it's called the Tao of Pizza. And that is actually a book that I'm published. It's either just coming out or it's been out for a while. The Tao of Pizza, it's kind of hard to explain, but the Tao is it's kind of an Eastern concept. It's a Zen. The simplest way I could explain it is Zen is a cross between so there's really two kinds of Buddhism. There's the Indian kind, but then it traveled all the way across Asia. And so there's Japanese versions and Chinese versions. And the Zen takes Taoism because it was already there when Buddhism got to the East. And then the word Tao is just a cool word. It means, if you can explain what it means, you're not doing it right. The first verse of the Tao Te Ching says the great Tao cannot be described. So you always just have this big connection, big picture that everything's connected to everything, and that we're all kind of on a healing journey, on a path toward wholeness.
Love that.
And then pizza is kind of the way you divide, like everyone thinks everything has to be divided up into a pie, and it could be different aspects of your life. For me, it's financial, spiritual, family. My family's a huge part. So all these, back to the Zig Ziglar life wheel. And the pizza is kind of a symbol of those things. So, and it was kind of fun. I wanted to be something spiritual and something food. So, Tao Pizza Project, that's how it got started. And I've got a blog on the Tao Pizza that I've had. I don't want anyone to go look. It's only for my closest friends. Okay. No, you can. I'm being a little tongue in cheek with it, but it is, it's essays that I wanted to include in the book. It's, masters that I've trained with along the way. It's their work. Like I have a Qigong master that I've trained with over the years named Vicky, the Way of Joy Qigong. So I've written some of her. She has some meditations on there. So anyone who just asked me about it and they want to kind of give themselves a free meditation class, I created that resource. Anyone who's interested to go kind of search it out on their own.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. The book is coming out, or is it already out?
So it probably just came out.
From
I'm working with Jeremy and John on that too.
Oh, really? Okay.
So the podcast and the book are going to kind of go together.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
Which is dovetailing nicely. Yeah.
That's great. And then as far as your show, how have you found it? I know you've done a few episodes. How have you found being on the other side of the chair or the right side?
I'll tell you, when I sat down to do this, so I've recorded 5 episodes myself, and none of the first one's just about to go up because I had to prove all the other artwork and everything that goes with it. But when I sat down today, I was thinking, this is kind of a relief that I could let Drew do all the hard work, and I just kind of have to show up. So it is it energizes me. You know what I mean? To me, it's a fun project. It's something that
it does. I have to agree. I leave every podcast. Oftentimes my wife's working from home and I'll be kind of ho-hum going into it, nervous. And I come out of the podcast, it's like, you're like a different person. You're so animated. I want to run into the other room and tell all about it.
Yeah.
I find so much value in it. But like a lot of my agency friends, like it seems like 2-3 years ago, we all kind of started podcasts, and it is not for everybody. I mean, you do have to be, I think, truly interested in what people are saying and really get something out of the answers.
Yeah. Well, in your business, you're serving people in the beverage industry, but you also have a lot of in the supply chain or people who are suppliers to wineries. It's not just wineries.
Yep. We're right at the nexus.
Yeah. And I've watched a few, and one of my favorite, the one you did with Mike Houlihan of the barefoot story.
Oh,
It was incredible. That was a good one.
They're doing some amazing stuff. If you haven't listened, for anybody out there, if you haven't listened to that barefoot story, get the audiobook, because he's doing something truly amazing with this audio theater. So they even had Ed Asner on the late Ed Asner on his audiobook, reading it and playing the roles, which really brought that book to life.
Yeah, you had actors bringing it to life rather than somebody just reading the book. Yeah, it's a brilliant project. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that episode. So what can your listeners look forward to listening to?
So we're going to have people who are career supply chain professionals, people who have built their career. A lot of them, some of them gone to college, a lot of them haven't. And a lot of people who are now vice president of operations, they started pulling cases in the 90s and just have built a career. So they're going to get a good mix of that. And I'm going to reach out to some people. I'm going to stretch and get some guests that people I don't know, so best-selling authors. I've already had, so one of my coaches is a best-selling author. He's on our pod, Sean Phillips, who wrote the book Strength for Life. He's going to be on my podcast. But we've got a great lineup of authors, business people, innovators, people who've built a career in supply chain.
Well, that sounds fantastic. And as we've learned today, there's so much to learn. Like we haven't even barely delved into the philosophy behind it and the motivations. So I can't wait to listen to that.
Yeah, there'll be some great ideas that already just on the ones I have. I was amazed. I knew it would be great conversations just because of all the conversations I've had over the years of learning my profession. I've learned from these. These are all the people that I learned from about, not just about the racking side, but about their business side, because what's their business case? That's I've had to learn their side of the story. So yeah, so far it's been a blast.
Yeah. Can't wait to listen. So as we're wrapping down the end, and as you'll see, I am famous for clunky closes. Is there anything that I have not asked you that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I think this was great. I really appreciate you having me on. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I'm energized. I am going to have to get, and you do a nice job. I'm going to check out some more of your episodes. I want to watch the one on Joe Wagner.
Oh yeah.
Because I know of him, and
that was a good one. And he brought up something about like kind of unifying the distribution models and moving east, because it's less warehouse. I mean, cheaper land, easier to store, and you don't really need to have all your wine in Napa.
No, exactly. That's a great. It's just like the Amazon story where you don't have to have all the TVs and the TVs. You can have, distributed where it makes the most sense geographically with cost of freight and fuel and everything else. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Mark, where can people find out more about the Tao of Pizza and Specialized Storage Solutions? So the Tao of Pizza is TAOOFPIZZA.com and specialracks.com. Those are the plural. Specialracks.com is our company website. Oh, perfect. Yeah. Go there. And if you're a winery and you're looking to optimize your situation, you got to talk to a pro, because chances are if you're putting up the racks, they're going to be too narrow, too close together, and you're going to be doing yourself a disservice. Yeah, we're happy to come out and redo it too. Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. That's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.